Evening, everyone. My name is Doug Orr. I'm the chair of the local group of the Sierra Club, Woods and Wetlands. And for those of you that are the area, Woods and Wetlands is the most northeastern corner of Lake County or of Illinois and covering Lake County and part of Cook County. We have a really exciting presentation tonight. A couple things. We are going to record this presentation. So if you don't wish to have your face showing, if you go to the bottom left-hand portion of your screen, there's a stop visit video or start video. You can just click on that to shut off the video. And next to that is a mute button. If you're not muted, please mute during the presentation. So with that, Thomas.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Doug. And welcome to another in our series of monthly programs on all aspects of the environment and the nature. Just the other day, a friend and I were hiking in the Ryerson Woods and of Lake County, and we noticed the beauty around us, but really could not begin to identify any of the trees. So tonight, our program will focus on how to identify trees and bushes and other plants in their wintertime slumber. Before we get to the program, I want to review our schedule of future programs. We've got 5 speakers lined up through the month of June, and we're really excited about all these programs. They are all on the second Sunday of the month at 7 o'clock in the evening. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, we are really excited to have a special Valentine's Day program featuring Nan Buckhart of the Lake County Forest Preserve District, who will talk about courtship and reproduction in the natural world during the winter. So we're really excited about having Nan join us on Valentine's Day. A month later, on March 14th, we are lining up a program on environmental justice. Environmental justice is the concept that environmentalism, or let's say environmental degradation, hits people of color and people of limited economic means much harder than it hits the rest of us in places like Lake County, Illinois. So we're going to be exploring that on March 14th. On April 11, Amy Lord of the Ice Age Trail Alliance in Wisconsin is going to be joining us to describe the beautiful Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin. It's 1,100 miles entirely within the state of Wisconsin. The Ice Age Trail, along with the better known Appalachian Trail and Pacific Crest Trail. The Ice Age Trail is one of 11 national scenic trails in the United States. And for those of you who've already hiked it, you know just how beautiful it is. It's gorgeous, and a lot of it is only an hour or an hour and a half away from Lake County here. On May 9th, we have a fascinating program coming up on monarch butterflies, featuring a scientist from the Field Museum. And on June 13th, we have a program on camping for newbies that will be offered by the store manager of the REI store in Vernon Hills. Tonight's program will feature Jeff Weiss talking about winter plant identification, and then Sharon Starr will talk about a new initiative in woods and wetlands devoted to plastics, in particular one-time use of plastics. And then Jay Futterman, one of our very active members, will talk about a unique opportunity that he has come across. If you have any questions, particularly during Jeff's presentation, just use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to ask a question. And after Jeff is done, we will filter through those questions and ask some of them of Jeff, so he will have an opportunity to respond to your questions. Few words about Jeff. Jeff is an ecologist who lives in Buffalo Grove. He teaches native plant propagation and ecological restoration classes at the Morton Arboretum. He's been active in the Sierra Club for many years. He's affiliated with the Northwest Cook County Sierra Club group, but he's also an outings leader in Lake County for woods and wetlands. So some of you who come hiking or bicycling or kayaking with us will have an opportunity to meet Jeff sooner or later if you haven't already. Jeff earned his master's degree in natural resources and environmental science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he has taught classes in the horticulture department of the College of Lake County and Oakton Community College. He founded the Buffalo Grove Environmental Action Team and the Buffalo Creek Clean Water Partnership. He's a volunteer steward and leader in the Buffalo Grove Prairie Guardians. Jeff is going to enhance our enjoyment of winter hiking by teaching us to recognize plants, trees, shrubs, wildflowers, and grasses from their wintertime shape and characteristics, including bark, buds, leaves that remain on the trees, and seeds. This presentation will describe the keys to identifying plants in winter, and it will offer a sneak preview of spring by unlocking a few secrets of seed dormancy and germination. This program, I think, is a great opportunity for whole families. Those of you who are parents with little kids in your household, take them out into the forest preserves and ask them to identify the trees on the basis of what Jeff teaches us today. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Thomas. I am very pleased to be with you tonight, and I am going to go right to screen share so you don't have to look at my COVID haircut any longer. Thomas, can you tell me that my screen is visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect, perfect.
Might want to press on that display on the bottom. Yeah, right there. Yep.
Put it on slideshow and away we go. One more time. Here we go.
Yeah.
So a program called Corpse Botany doesn't sound very inviting, I have to admit, so I'm delighted with the turnout. Furthermore, the title's a little misleading because, as Tom alluded, these really aren't corpses, but instead they're just plants that are overwintering and waiting their turn for renewal in spring. All of that aside, though, my goal tonight is to give you some ideas of new ways to enjoy nature in winter and some tools to help inform and improve your experience. So with that, I'm going to show you a little word cloud I made up with some of the things that you can experience in winter. Obviously, the topography, weather, the fallen logs, the hydrology, if you can see ice and open water, the soils, the animals are all there, but many of them are hiding under the snow. On the other hand, there's a lot to be seen in the plant kingdom, and inside the circle are some of the types of vegetation that are visible and very enjoyable in the winter if you know what to look for. So I am going to propose that there is a process for enjoying nature in winter. Step one is unplug your earbuds and your artificial intelligence. Step two is to read the landscape. Look up, look down, look around. Change your frame of reference. Focus in the up close and off in the distance. And what you'll begin to notice is that vegetation is a huge part of what you see. Then open up the rest of your senses, your sense of smell, hearing, touch, and taste. And then you can start looking at some of these plant corpses that we're going to go through and talk about for the next 45 minutes. So some of the things that we're going to focus on tonight include things that Thomas mentioned: the growth form of plants, their shape, the bark, twigs, and leaves that are retained in winter. In some instances, their odor, but particularly the seed heads and the remaining fruit and seeds that are left as winter gets underway. And I'm going to propose that you consider using some of these resources in your winter adventures. I'm going to go through and give you some examples of how each of these tools can be used to increase your enjoyment and your appreciation of nature. So the first two are little tiny pocket booklets that were published by May Watts, who was a scientist and educator at the Morton Arboretum for most of her career. And these were published in the 1930s. The tree finder, and they're still in print, amazingly enough. The tree finder is one that is used to identify trees based on their leaves or their needles in the case of conifers. And then there's the winter tree finder that I'm going to talk a little bit more about that focuses in on identifying trees based on their twigs or buds in wintertime. And the very first page of the book, May Watts goes through the parts of the twig that she uses to help identify plants. There's only 6 of them: the terminal bud, the lateral buds, leaf scars, lenticels, the little dots on stems and twigs, vein scars, and bud scale scars. And if you can learn some nomenclature and some ways of differentiating between these as they occur on different trees, you're well on your way to being an expert tree identifier. So her book and other books make use of dichotomous keys. And a dichotomous key is basically a ladder that walks you down through the plant kingdom. And at each level, there's 2 choices. There is this choice, and then there's all other. So if you take the first of the paired characteristics, it takes you down that ladder. If it's all other, it sends you off to the side to follow other ladders down. But in the very beginning of her book, it starts with begin here. And if the tree is a conifer and has needles, then you follow to the pine tree illustrated on the left. And if the cones are globular, soon disintegrating, it is a bald cypress. And bald cypress is one of the trees, it's not native to the Chicago area, but it's widely planted and very successful tree. That bald cypress is a conifer that loses its leaves in winter. And that's why it belongs in the trees in the winter tree ID book. If it's not a bald cypress, it goes down to the other conifer that loses its leaves, European larch or American larch. And if not, then it goes into the deciduous trees that most of us think about as being our winter ID. So here's some pictures and illustration of one type of breakdown that can be made, and that is between the branching, the ways in which twigs form their branches and their buds. The first one is alternate, and that picture is from a tree in my backyard. It's called a musclewood or a blue beech. The second one is it's a silver maple. And you can see in that silver maple, it has opposite branching. The branches come right across from each other on the tree, and so do the buds. And there's not very many of our trees that have that opposite branching. And so there's a little mnemonic called mad horse bucking to give you the possibilities there. M is for maple, A is for ash, D is for dogwood. Those trees have opposite branching. And then there's horse chestnuts and buckeyes. So if you see a tree with branching, it's going to be one of those. And it's a pretty good tool for beginning to sort down the line of identifying trees. But there is an exception. There's an exception to every rule, and here it is, buckthorn. Buckthorn is a nasty invasive tree. It was introduced 100 years ago, and it's now the most abundant tree in northern Illinois. And a lot of time and effort is going into eradicating it, especially in Lake County, where there's a goal to eradicate it from some of the forest preserves by 2030. But in this case, the branching is not quite opposite and it's not alternate. So it's called subopposite. And it's really a very good way if you are walking along a the edge of a forest looking in to identify whether you're looking at an infestation of buckthorn, is to look for these almost but not quite opposite branches. Another important way to identify trees is by their shape. And I always am looking out the window, probably to my wife's horror, as we drive up I-94 into Wisconsin, looking at the trees along the interstate, trying to figure out which ones are oaks and which ones are maples and others. And you can actually tell a lot about the identity of a tree from its shape. In particular, oaks are a keystone, probably the most important trees in the eastern US. And they're in decline for a variety of reasons. But there's some distinctions that can be made about the shapes of oak trees that I'd like to walk through with you real quickly. The first one on the left is a red oak. It has the ascending branches. You see the branches heading straight up or almost straight up. The second one is our state tree, the white oak with wide spreading branches. The third one is the bur oak with the gnarled, twisty branches. And the fourth one is the pin oak, especially at the bottom of the tree, the leaves are descending. So those of you who have taken classes or attended Oaktober at the Morton Arboretum, you may know where I'm going with this, but I'm gonna have a break right now and lead a sing-along that you can all join in. This is the oak song. It's to the tune of No, 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 Your Oaks. And I'd like everybody to stand up where you are now and sing along with me. You ready? One, oops, I gotta fix my camera here. I practiced this, but I didn't remember to do it. All right, here we go. No, 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 your oaks, this is how they grow. Red oak, white oak, bur oak, pin oak, with acorns down below. Okay, you got it? Thomas, I don't see it. Thomas and Gloria, I don't see you standing. We got to do this again. Ready? Up, 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 up. No, 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 your oaks, this is how they grow. Red oak, white oaks, bur oak, pin oaks, with acorns down below. Hold on, thank you, thank you, thank you. So remember this and sing it with your kids when you're out in the woods and you see one of these magnificent oak trees. Obviously, trees can be identified by their leaves. Unfortunately, most of those leaves are not present right now. But I have a couple of oaks in my own yard. This is the tree on the upper left is a swamp white oak in my parkway. And most of its trees are still on there. This is the peeling defoliating bark that's so distinctive about swamp white oak trees. And this photo here is of the white oak trees, the leaves on the white oak tree on the side of my yard. And I learned something, I learned a lot while preparing this presentation, but I learned that this is called marcescence when oaks retain their leaves in winter. So that can be a tool to identify some trees from their leaves. And then obviously there's the leaves on the tree, the leaf litter on the forest floor and the acorn. And that forest leaf litter is very, very important for providing nutrients to the soil, for sheltering little seedlings, including baby oaks as they grow, and also providing fuel for prescribed fires, which are an important management technique for our oak woodlands. Then there's the bark, very distinctive bark here. This tree is one of our native hackberry trees with these furrowed ridges of bark. Really interesting if you look up close because there's layers of bark, layer upon layer of bark. This one, some people call this the potato chip tree, the black cherry, because of its bark that is formed in chips. And this is a little twig of our wonderful bur oak tree, the invader on the prairie, and it can go in and form savannas in prairies. It's a tree pioneer. And the way that it does that is by forming this thick, corky bark that protects the stem, the bole, and the twigs from fire. It'll tolerate quite a hot fire and then come back strong. So bark is an important way of being able to identify trees. And this is a quiz that was just put out in the last newsletter of the Illinois Native Plant Society. And I wonder how you do in correctly identifying the trees just from their bark. I have a confession to make. I only got 5 out of 8 correct on this. And then there's the twigs. And this is what May Watts gets to in her winter tree ID book. And you can, this one is from the Friends of Fresh Pond. You can find it on the internet. Print up a card, take it out into the woods, and use it to compare with the twigs on the trees that you see during your winter walk. Where they can't see the time. Trees can sometimes also be identified from their seed heads, but this is not so important for trees. This one happens to be sumac. I can't tell whether it's a sumac. It's probably sumac shrubs rather than a staghorn sumac tree. But seed heads are really much more important in identifying grasses and wildflowers, which we're going to get into in a minute. Second set of tools, and these are wonderful, are the rapid field guides published by the Field Museum. These are, there's hundreds and hundreds of them available, many of them customized for the Chicago region. This first one is a part of a tree guide identifying trees in winter. This one's published by local volunteers. Very helpful. One of the beautiful twigs that we have in our area is the bitternut hickory, also called mustard twig hickory, easily identified by these distinctive yellow buds on the twig. Another rapid guide that just came out is a fall seed collecting guide. One of our Lake County Forest Preserve employees and a volunteer photographer, Dale Shields. Kelly Schultz and Dale Shields published many of these guides with pictures of the seeds and the seed heads of these plants late in summer when they're ready to harvest. So this can be used again to identify what these plants are going to look like in winter. Then this one is another one, seed heads. All of these can be downloaded and used, printed out freely, no cost. Another tool I want to mention real quick is this one. This is for the expert. This Flora of the Chicago region just came out 3 years ago, and it's got over 3,000 plants that occur in the Chicagoland area. It's, as you can see, it's a dictionary, and it weighs 20 pounds. So unless you're training for a backpacking trip, you're probably not going to take it out into the field on your nature hike. But some of these inserts and glossaries that are really helpful are available now online and free. So I urge you to look into that if you really want to get down into the weeds in your study of plants. This one is my personal favorite. This is called Wildflowers in Winter. It's currently not in print, but it is still available as used at bookstores and online. So what I love about, this is Carol Levine, illustrations by Dick Raub. What I love about them are these wonderful line drawings and descriptions of how plants look in winter. What I realized is there's really no, on Google, there's really nothing, very little of the way plants, especially wildflowers and grasses, look in winter. So this is a valuable source for being able to identify, in this case, wild yam. The flowers are on the left, the fall seed pods or the fruit are visible on the left, on the right, on the vine, with the line drawing in the middle. And you can see the way that this book absolutely captures the appearance and the gestalt of the plant. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And here's the last one I want to mention. I am not a power user of iNaturalist, but iNaturalist is a phone app that you can use to record your observations, and not only record your observations, but take a photo on your cell phone, enter it into the app, and photos and clues about the identity of your unknown plant will come up in the app. Then attach your photo with your identification on it, and it goes out to the community of thousands and thousands of iNaturalist members, and they will confirm your observation. And once it's done, it will be mapped and included in the app as another sighting of that plant. And there are thousands of users, and I believe millions and millions of observations now that can be accessed via iNaturalist. So that's the first part of my talk, is to tell you what tools are available. The second part of my talk is to actually take you on a little winter nature walk and try to use these ideas of corpse botany to tell some stories and talk about the things you might see. And the place that I've chosen for this nature hike is a very special place. It's called Deer Grove Forest Preserve. It's in Cook County. It's the oldest Cook County Forest Preserve, which makes it the oldest forest preserve in the world. It's over 100 years old. Deer Grove West, across, which is west of the western part of the preserve, is a nature preserve with the highest protection available in a very, very wonderful ecosystem. The part east of Quentin Road is called Deer Grove East, and Deer Grove East was mostly farmed until relatively recent times, and the farmers installed drain tiles to drain the water off the land. And it was run as a forest preserve, but plantation trees were installed, and it was pretty degraded and low quality. That is until about 14 years ago, when Open Lands was appointed to administer a grant to create a wetland mitigation project here. And as a result of that project, more than 20 wetlands were rewatered by disabling the drain tiles, and many thousands, lots of money and manpower has gone into restoring the landscape by removing invasive trees and planting seeds, and thousands of plugs and conducting burns. And there's been quite a group of dedicated volunteers. I was involved in the formation of this group, and 10 years ago this month is when we started the planning work for the Friends of Deer Grove East, now Deer Grove Natural Area Volunteers. So I want to share some of the things that I've enjoyed and appreciated by being a volunteer at Deer Grove. And a lot of them have to do with the seed heads and leaves and stems that are retained by our plants in winter. Now, Deer Grove East has three main ecosystems. It has some remnant and a lot of restored prairie or recreated prairie that was from former farmland. It has savannas with a few trees grading into deep oak forest. And then there's these wonderful wetlands. And so I've got examples of corpse botany from each of these ecosystems, and we're going to take a little trip down the trail around Deer Grove East to look at them. So Illinois is the prairie state, and it is the center of the tall grass prairie. There's a few characteristic species that are representative of the Illinois tall grass prairie. And one of my favorites is this Indian grass. It's a native grass. It grows up to about 8 feet tall, and it has the most wonderful yellow flowers in late summer. Who knew that grasses had spectacular flowers? But I think this one does. And there you see on the right my corpse photograph of the seed head of Indian grass, and you can still run your fingers through it and pull a lot of viable seeds off of that seed head. And what that means is that in spring, when these seeds finally hit the ground, they do not have dormancy, and they are ready to germinate and start a new crop of Indian grass. But they also have to compete with the existing Indian grass because it is a perennial grass. So it does best after a burn or over bare soil. Here's another one of our famous iconic tall grasses, big blue stem. This one is also called turkey toes because the flowers flare off from the stem or the culm, and it looks like the toes of a turkey. In winter, on the left, most of the turkey's toes have been frostbitten, but there's still a lot of seeds left, and those too will drop to the soil and form part of the crop of the new growth in 2021. The little sibling of big blue stem is little blue. It's a gorgeous plant. Retains this kind of purplish hue in places until late into the season. Those fluffy seeds have mostly fallen off, but you can see from my corpse photo that there are still lots of seeds hanging out. The shape of the stem and the position of the seeds is quite visible on that photo. Another of our tall grasses is switchgrass. Switchgrass is being looked at as a potential biofuel. It's a very productive plant, and as you can see, it forms at least a resting spot for monarch butterflies. Probably nothing in terms of nectar, but it is a place to hang out and rest. And many of those seeds are retained well into winter. And I think this is the last tall grass that I'm going to show you. This one is Canada Wild Rye. It's a very lovely, scraggly looking stem loaded with seeds. The long curly awns on the end of the seeds give it a fuzzy appearance. And that fuzzy appearance can still be seen in winter. So that makes this a very easy to identify tall grass during your winter walks. So now a few wildflowers from the prairie. This one is a spectacular photo of a clear-wing moth nectaring on a summertime wild bergamot flower. And this plant happens to be a member of the mint family. Even in winter, you can take these fuzzy seed heads, crunch them up, and take a whiff, and you'll definitely smell the aroma of Earl Grey tea. In fact, I thought, and I told people for many years that this is the actual flavoring for Earl Grey tea, and it was only in preparing for this talk that I researched that and learned that no, actually, oil of bergamot comes from a kind of orange, a citrus fruit, but it has nearly an identical aroma to this wild bergamot. It's still a lovely plant, and those seeds are still hiding out in those seed pods. Now, this round-headed bush clover is another one of our distinctive plants. This one happens to be a legume, which means that it produces nitrogen in the root nodules and adds it to the soil. So our prairies have a number of nitrogen-fixing plants. Round-headed bush clover, Lespedisa capitata, if you like Latin, is one of them. And it retains this very lovely and distinctive shape in winter, easy to recognize during your walks along prairie hikes. The next one is called Rattlesnake Master. Where it got its name is that apparently Eastern Indians used it for ceremonies. They rubbed themselves with the juice in ceremonies where they handled rattlesnakes. doesn't prevent or cure rattlesnake bites, but these Native Americans believed that, and probably knew very well, that it prevented snake bite. Very interesting. The summer flowers are visited by a wide number of bees for their pollen. And in winter, these spiky seed heads persist and are, again, easy to recognize and identify. This one is of interest to me. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on evening primrose, Anathera biennis. This plant is another medicinal plant. It was brought to China over a century ago, where apparently it's become an invasive plant. So some of the plants that have been imported from Europe and Asia have become invasive over here, but we've also sent our own pest plants abroad. But China has incorporated the oil from the seeds into their medicine, and now it's also used as a supplement in the US. And I read, for those of you who like statistics, that China now produces 20,000 tons a year of oil from, has a crop of 20,000 tons a year of these seeds that they process into oil. And I know that each plant, as loaded with seeds as they are, might produce an ounce of seeds at the most. So trying to imagine how many plants it would take to produce 20,000 tons is stretched my mind. But I want to mention a couple other things about this plant. It's kind of a nuisance plant for us in ecological restoration. It's weedy, it's kind of leggy, it's pretty aggressive. But it also is candy for Japanese beetles. So I have adopted it for my garden, and I grow it as a decoy in my vegetable garden. I grow it next to my vegetable garden as a decoy, and it attracts all of the Japanese beetles. Twice a day, I go out and tap them into a little pot of soapy water where they go swimming and drown. And since I've started using evening primrose, I have not had any Japanese beetles go on my beans or other plants. So I'm a big fan of this plant. Thank you, evening primrose. This is an interesting plant. We think of pollinators as being bees and hummingbirds and butterflies. The carrion flower has a little different strategy. The flower here on the right is it's not very showy, but it doesn't have to be because it stinks. And it uses that stench to attract flies as its pollinators. And the flies pick up pollen on their legs and they go off to another flower and spread it around. And so by the end of the summer, that pollen has led to these big balls of beautiful blue berries. And by winter, those berries have fallen off, leaving this beautiful vine with the empty seed head on it. Again, making it a very lovely and distinctive element of the winter landscape. This is another nuisance plant, Cockle Bird, but it's a plant with a couple of good stories associated with it. Cockle Bird is poisonous, and farmers hate it because it'll poison their cattle if they eat it. And hikers hate it because it gets in there, and pet owners hate it because it gets in fur and sticks on clothes. But it's a very effective technique for spreading its seeds. And if you look closely at the fruit on the right, you'll see that how it manages to be so sticky. It has all those little burrs coming out, and each little burr has both prickers coming out from it and a hook on the end of it. And that hook on the end of it was the inspiration for the inventor of Velcro. He identified that hook as, hey, that is a good idea for sticking something onto something else. And he worked and developed the other side of Velcro to hold on to that hook, and has had huge success. Obviously, we all use Velcro almost every day of our lives. There's another thing for me as an ecologist and a plant propagation teacher that's even more interesting than that, though, and that is that this plant, this fruit has 2 seeds in it, and those 2 seeds are different from each other. And this plant is one of the few plants, maybe the only plant I'm showing you that's an annual. In other words, it needs to grow from seeds fresh every year. There's nothing underground that will enable it to grow back next year. So it has a strategy of growing 2 seeds with different characteristics. There's a top seed and a bottom seed. The bottom seed, if it hits the ground, is good to go. It's ready to germinate and grow. But the top seed has dormancy, and that dormancy protects it in the soil for years and years until the conditions are right for that plant to grow. So this, I'm not sure how much help Cockle Bird needs to persist, but it does have this strategy of being able to hide its seeds underground for a long time in dormancy, waiting for their chance to emerge and produce more Velcro. We're done with the prairie now. We're moving into the savanna and the woodland areas at Deer Grove. The first grass that I want to show you is this lovely woodland brome. In summer, has beautiful blades and foliage and these drooping flowers and developing seeds. By winter, it's lost some, but not all of the seeds, and it retains both the brown leaves and the drooping shape. It really is a beautiful and distinctive grass in our woods and savanna areas. This one, though, takes the prize for me. This one's called bottlebrush grass. Those who are parents, my age, probably had to clean out baby bottles with a brush that looks something like this. I don't know that they're in use anymore, but it's an apt name for this plant. But as you're walking through the woods, look for these displays of these seeds poking straight out from the stems. That is a sure sign that you're in a patch of bottlebrush grass, and enjoy it while you're in there. Now, this one was a surprise. This is kind of an unusual plant. It's definitely unusual at Deer Grove, but this is the Michigan lily. It used to be called Turk's cap lily, but now that's classified as a separate species. And this, the photo on the top left is the way it looks in the summer. It is just a gorgeous wildflower. But it's also deer candy. Deer will go through and mow down 99% of these plants before they reach into flower, and then they'll go after the other 1% after it's gone to flower. So I was amazed and very pleased to find this, this plant with all these seed heads, and this pod still loaded with seeds. Here is from Prairie Moon Nursery. Here's a photo of what those lily seeds look like in their size. So I left the plant stand, but I did break off one pod and scattered the seeds around the vicinity to help disperse it. And hopefully we'll see many more of these plants next year at Deer Grove. Another spectacular plant is Great St. John's wort. This plant gets about 4 feet tall, and it has the largest flowers, I believe, of any of the St. John's worts. It's found in shady areas, woods and savannas, and it has these beautiful ornate seed pods and loads and loads and loads of these tiny seeds. I didn't have to shake too hard to shake these seeds out. So I'm hopeful again that we'll see more of this plant at Deer Grove next year, because it is uncommon at present. Another one of my favorites is this purple giant hyssop. This is another member of the mint family, but unlike the wild bergamot, it's not as aromatic, but it does share the characteristic of having a square stem and opposite leaf arrangement. And in the fall, it has these brown seed heads that again are loaded with seeds, even late in early winter, late fall, early winter. There's still seeds raining down into the snow and the soil around it. Got a couple of nuisance plants in the woods. This one's called stickseed or Virginia stickseed. And just about anybody who's ever taken a walk in the woods has encountered this one. The brittle stems and sometimes the entire plant will break off and stick themselves to your clothes. So if you have a fleece or heaven forbid a fluffy sweater, you may spend hours trying to remove these seeds from that fabric. It's a very effective hitchhiker. But beyond that, in my research, it turns out that the Cherokee used the roots of this plant. They ground them up and mixed them with bear fat. That's a recipe for success. And it's used to treat skin cancers. So many of these plants were exploited for their medicinal qualities long before we knew them as our prairie and woodland plants. This beautiful little flower hides a nasty corpse underneath it. This one is Multiflora Rose. It was widely planted as a hedgerow plant between pasture areas. But immediately, as soon as it was planted, it invaded into the pasture and made it useless for cattle because cattle will not go near this stuff. And the reason they won't go near this stuff is because unlike our nice garden roses that have nice straight thorns, and I don't know how well you can see it on this photo, but these thorns are curved back toward the stem. And once you get grabbed by thorns of Multiflora Rose, you're in for a fight. This plant is a kind of a vine. It flops itself up on the side of a tree and grows up, sometimes 15, 20 feet high up into the tree. And it's very aggressive. All of these little berries, all these little rose hips are loaded with seeds ready to form new colonies of Multiflora Rose. And this plant, hopefully most of you or all of you would recognize it. Leaves of 3, let it be. This is poison ivy, Toxicodendron radicans. But I publish it here, I put it here for a couple of reasons. The first reason is as climate changes, as the level of CO2 rises in the atmosphere, there's winners and losers. And research at Duke University has disclosed that poison ivy is a big winner. Poison ivy thrives under conditions of high CO2 concentration. And I think I've noticed in recent years that it's become much more abundant and aggressive in our forest preserves, especially along trails and growing up trees. The second reason I bring up poison ivy is that we have not given any appreciation for the roots that are doing all the work underground during the winter. So I show this portion of a poison ivy tree growing up an oak tree at Deer Grove. And the close-up is of the rootlets that are going into the bark of the oak tree to hold this plant in place. There's thousands and thousands of little rootlets, hair-like rootlets that poison ivy plants put out as they're climbing. And these plants will climb tens of feet up into the tops of trees for some of that golden sunlight. And all along that course, you can see the hairy rootlets holding it on for dear life. So now we're finally in the wetlands. One of the tall grasses of the Midwestern wetland is called prairie cordgrass. Prairie cordgrass likes it wet, grows on the edge of marshes and swamps and mostly sunny areas. And it has, you can see it in summer, it has the little tiny white flowers hanging down, not as showy as the Indian grass, but grass flowers very, very visible on this plant. One of my favorite native shrubs is buttonbush. This is the plant in flower. It is a shrub that grows in swamps and shady wetlands, and it's very visible in and gets its name from its winter form. All these little buttons hanging on the end of the branches makes it a button bush. Then there's some gorgeous wildflowers at Deer Grove in the wetlands. This one happens to be swamp milkweed. It's a kinder, gentler version of the common milkweed. Swamp milkweed, I think, is a lovelier plant, much less aggressive, equally good host for monarch butterfly caterpillars, and a really, really nice garden plant. I urge you to use it in your gardens. It will grow very well in wet or medium soils. And this one has a story associated with it too. This one is a wetland plant called blue vervain. Blue vervain has a square stem too, but that's not what's interesting about it. I looked at the website of the New England School of Botanical Medicine, and this plant is said to promote emotional well-being, anti-anxiety, and reduces stress from overthinking. And it's especially prescribed for patients who have trouble sleeping, or patients who are plotting revenge while falling asleep. So I think we all need a little more blue vervain in our political life. And I recommend it. I don't know whether it works, but I recommend the cure. So now we're coming to the end of this tour, but there's a couple more things to show you. Illinois is home to Northern Illinois is home to 83 sedges, and sedges grow in all kinds of habitats, woods, prairies, wetlands, wet, dry, different shapes and sizes, but they all have one thing in common. Sedges have edges, and here is a cross-section of a stem of lake sedge showing the edges or the triangular stem shape. But the beautiful leaves of this plant, it grows about 4 feet tall along the edge of the ponds at Deer Grove, is a nice winter site. And then there's our friends, the cattails. The Native Americans ate the flowers, the pollen, the shoots in spring, made flour out of the dried and ground up roots, and used the fluff in fall to pack the diapers of their babies. This was a important plant, and unfortunately, our wetlands are being invaded by a Eurasian version of this plant that hybridizes with the native cattail and completely takes over and monopolizes wetlands. But if you're in an area where you happen to see our native cattail, it's really quite a lovely tame plant that plays nicely with other wetland plants. And we hope that eventually it can be reestablished after some of the other invasive cattails are removed. So that's a tour of most of the plants, but let's not forget about our animals and the evidence that they leave behind in winter. This little goldenrod gall fly lays its eggs in a goldenrod plant in summer, and by fall that goldenrod plant gall persists until a downy woodpecker comes along and has it as a nice snack. So these plants are hosts for animals, and those animals are food for other animals, and it goes round and round. But that leads to another one of these rapid guides that I found, just to show you the extent that they're made available. This one is a whole series of photos and descriptions of different galls that are found in our Chicago region. It's amazing the resources that are available if you really are serious about studying and learning about nature. And our final animal contestant for tonight is the great horned owl. The great horned owl is a top predator of birds, but especially small rodents in winter. And after it eats them, it regurgitates their fur and their bones. And those owl pellets can oftentimes be found under trees in winter where owls have been roosting. And because they've been treated with the acid in the owl's stomach, they're safe to handle and take home and dissect. And it's a really cool, interesting thing if you can find one and take them home and show them to your kids.
45.
Timer says I'm on 45 minutes. And
you can
all
take another
I-
minute or two if you would like to continue. This is fascinating.
Well, I have just, I think this might be my one last slide. This is
Okay.
a game that we cooked up for some winter hikers at Illinois Beach State Park. This is in Spanish because there were Spanish speakers. Gloria did the translation, and we found everything on the list except for the poison ivy and the owl pellets. But it's one of games, and make your nature walk fun for kids by bringing materials and having things to talk about before or after the hike. And so with that, I just want to thank the photographers whose summer photos I took and used in this presentation. I want to thank the Sierra Club Woods and Wetland Outings Group for organizing this presentation and getting this great turnout. I want to thank the stewards at Deer Grove for being such wonderful colleagues and friends and the work that they're doing there. I want to thank my Buffalo Grove Prairie Guardians for their inspiring work. And I especially want to thank my wife, Martha. The two of us learned corpse photography together, and I would not have been able to put on any of the photography without Martha's help. So, and I want to thank you, the audience, for taking part and sitting through this presentation. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Jeff. This was absolutely fascinating. We so appreciate it. Those of you who have questions, you can just press the chat button at the bottom of your screen and make sure you have addressed it to everyone. And Linda and Rosemary will sort through those questions and pose some of the questions to Jeff.
Okay, well, I have one from early on in your presentation, Jeff. By the way, that's Illinois Beach State Park behind me, and that's a shout out to Don. Neely D wanted to know, does marcescence apply to all trees that don't abscise well, or only oaks?
Yeah, marcescence, I think, applies to all deciduous trees. I don't think it applies to the coniferous trees that retain needles over winter, but any kind of tree for a variety of reasons might retain its leaves for part or all of winter. Never a problem. By spring, the new buds are pushing out and they'll knock those old leaves off. But yes, it's a broad term for the condition where trees retain their leaves.
Maggie wanted to thank you for the iNaturalist app, and I'm sure she's not the only one. I had a question that I want to slip in here. I didn't type it in, but it was about the grasses in the prairie. Some of them seem to form bunches or clods on the ground. Which ones?
Oh.
And how can you identify them by their clump that they leave behind?
Wow. So a lot of the grasses in the tall grass prairie are bunch grasses. And there's so much to know about grasses. But there are other grasses that are rhizomatous. And that means they spread, instead of by bunching and by expanding their clumps, they send underground roots or rhizomes and form new stems out of the ground. To my knowledge, those are the two main ways that grasses expand their presence. And most of our tall grass prairies, because real estate is very, very hotly contested, most of the tall grasses are bunch grasses and spread by expanding their their root system and expanding the number of stems coming out of the ground.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Okay, I've got one from Carolyn. I think it was following up on a comment about that Diane made about prairie sundrops after you were talking about evening primrose. And Carolyn wants to know, evening primrose and prairie sundrops, although both onetheras are different species, do they both attract, she said repel, but I think she means attract Japanese beetles?
So yeah, I know prairie sundrops. There's a prairie plant, and there's several species closely related. I honestly don't know. I imagine though that Japanese beetles, being very broad spectrum herbivores, would probably go after all of them. But because the evening primrose can get 7 or 8 feet tall, they're very easy to find. So I imagine that would be breakfast and lunch and dinner. And if there was a snack required, those Japanese beetles might go looking for the more diminutive prairie sundrops.
Debbie wanted to know, is mallow similar to evening primrose and prairie sundrop?
Different plant family. Mallow, oh boy. They're not closely related at all.
Okay.
They are tall plants. There are some mallows growing in one of the wetlands at Deer Grove, at least one of the wetlands, and it's just a lovely, spectacular plant. Much more conservative, much more showy in a big flower way than the evening primrose, but I don't believe they're related.
Take the vervain. Take the vervain.
Tom wanted to know, is Deer Grove Forest Preserve now back to its original size?
Is it now back to its original size?
No, original state.
Original state.
Hey,
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, Tom, unfortunately, it will get there, but it might take another 100 or 200 years.
Oh my gosh.
The structure of a prairie is not only defined by the plants growing there, but also by the community of animals and insects, by the soils and the soil organisms. And so a restored or recreated prairie from farmland might have prairie species growing on it, but they will not have the level of diversity and community interaction between all of the species and the integrity of a unplowed or remnant prairie for any time in the foreseeable future.
I understand. Good. Thank you.
Let me just put in a plug for Buffalo Grove Prairie. It's a tiny patch, and we've been working on it for 32 years, not me personally, but our group. And it is a remnant prairie. It's one that has never been plowed. And the difference between a remnant and a restored prairie is dramatic. You have to really see a remnant prairie to appreciate how beautiful it can be.
Yeah. Mark had a question. He'd like the blue vervain recipe, please.
I wanted to. I gave you a citation. Go to the New England Journal of Botanical Medicine.
Okay.
Okay. Diane Phillips wants to know, how can you tell the difference between native and non-native cattails?
Okay. Well, I'm been at this for a while, but I'm still an amateur botanist. But and I saw Erin Faulkner, who come on the call. She is a very, very excellent botanist, and I think she found the most plants of any botanist in iNaturalist this year. And maybe Aaron can put hands up or down, but I believe that the difference, the most easily defined difference, is that there's a gap between the male flowers on top of the stem and the female flowers that become the fluff on the non-native cattails. So in the photo that I showed you, the smaller male flowers were right adjacent to the larger female, the brown female flowers, and that is a native cattail. If there's a gap on that stalk between the two types of flowers, then it's, I believe it's either the non-native or hybrid between the native and the non-native cattails. Anybody see Aaron's hand up?
The last question I have is how Thomas wanted to know how he can tell the difference between ash and elm trees when you're out walking around in the forest preserve.
Oh, that's a slam dunk.
Good.
Ash are mad horse bucking, and elms are alternate.
Okay.
But there's a lot more to it.
Okay.
Well, I think that's what Tom's question is. If you have two trees, I think he was just giving them as an example.
Yeah.
If you have two trees, what do you start looking at to start defining them?
Start looking at May Watt's wonderful books.
Yeah.
That's
All
where
right.
you start.
And those books date you. I have those from my college days.
I have a couple of other questions here, or actually an offer. Debbie tells us that she has sedge Frankie, F-A-R-N-K-I-I, in her yard. Would you like some seeds, Jeff?
Yeah.
Debbie, you want to get Jeff's information and together on that?
I grow sedges. There's a thing called warrior sedges. It was a strategy developed first by Tom Vanderpool at Citizens for Conservation. And the idea is to grow aggressive native sedges, aquatic sedges and emergent sedges, sedges that'll grow in and around wetlands, and to use them after cattails and other aggressive invasive plants have been removed, and to install those and have them compete to prevent those invasives from recolonizing those areas. So I grow some of them. Frankie I believe is a woodland sedge, but I do grow sedges. I have oak sedge or pen sedge in my native plant gardens, and I'd love to get my hands on some Frankie seeds.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want me to go again, Linda?
Go ahead, take Karen's. Do you have that one?
Well, yeah, as long as Jeff got into the area of invasives, we have two questions about invasives. Karen's Sarantoni wants to know, aren't those roadside lilies that you were talking about earlier invasives?
Oh, absolutely not. They're very conservative. By conservative, I mean plants that are likely to be found only in high quality, relatively undisturbed natural areas. That's one reason why I was so happy to see it at Deer Grove in the savannas, because it's kind of an unexpected find. No, that was the invasive lily, on the other hand, that's probably the tiger lily or the day lily, which is a totally different species. And what I want to say about that is that's an interesting invasive species, because when you find it out in a prairie or out in a woodland, to me, it usually means that once there was a farmhouse there, because our early settlers loved that plant and they put it in around every plant, around every building. And so now that plant has remained sometimes for decades or longer, it spreads out. But it probably indicates that nearby was once a farmhouse.
And then do you see Gloria's question there, Linda, about
I don't.
Gloria asked, so I know what reed canary grass looks like, dead and alive. Are there other invasive grasses?
Yeah, the big one right now that has been expanding dramatically over the past 10 or 20 years is called Phragmites, or giant reed. That one is even more aggressive than cattails, and it has completely, it's got the the plumes on top of a plant that might get 15 to 20 feet tall. And it completely dominates ditches along roads and wetlands, and excludes every other living thing from surviving inside of it.
What is the name of that again?
It's called Phragmites, or giant reed. Phragmites australis is the Latin name, but most.
If we're talking about the same thing, I used an app on my phone to identify something called the silver sagebrush about a month or two ago, and it was everywhere.
I'm not sure what that plant is, but Phragmites is very distinctive, very widespread, and expanding into almost every wetland across northern Illinois.
Is it kind of silverish?
The tall plumes are purplish in late summer and fall, and then they persist all the way through winter, but they turn brown. So it's like a giant grass plant with a big plume on the top of it.
We might be talking about the same thing.
It might be. It might be that I'm just unfamiliar with that common name.
Okay.
Actually, can I share? I found a picture, Doug. Do I have? I'm a co-host. Can I share, you think? Let me try. There. Is that it?
Yeah, that is a silver sagebrush, according to my app.
We mostly know that as Phragmites here.
Phragmites.
Phragmites. Very, very invasive, non-native variety of a plant.
I kind of think it's pretty myself, but
yeah.
Well, very good. Thank you very, very much, Jeff. This has been an absolutely splendid presentation. We are so grateful for your expertise and for your time. And those of us who are active in the outings team of Woods and Wetlands are also grateful for your leadership. And we hope to see you on an outing soon.
Thank you. And thanks for letting me sing.
And for the benefit of our audience, our Woods and Wetlands outings, like all of the outings throughout the entire United States for the Sierra Club, are on hold during the pandemic. But as soon as enough of us get vaccinated, the outings will resume. We are hoping that that will occur this summer. And as soon as it does, we will let you know, and you will have an opportunity to register for one of our Woods and Wetlands outings. And if you come along on one or more of those outings, you are more than likely to find Jeff as a fellow hiker or as an outings leader. Thank you very, very much, Jeff.
Thomas, before we leave, we did have one question about how to get invited to another one of these talks. Would you address that before we move on to Sharon?
Yes.
Briefly.
I think Gloria is taking all of the addresses for anyone who signed up and automatically adding them to our publicizing list, I think. And if that's not already the case, it will be, but I think it is already the case.
You'll get a thank you from me too, and that'll also give you information.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much, Jeff. We sure do appreciate it. Next, we're going to turn to Sharon Starr. Sharon is a longtime Sierra Club activist, a fellow tree hugger like all of us are. Sharon has been the force behind a new initiative on the use of plastics. So Sharon, take it away and share your screen.
Okay. Can you see the screen yet?
Yes, yes.
Plastics? Okay. Yes, I am really thankful to have this opportunity to share some exciting information about a new initiative of the Woods and Wetlands group of the Sierra Club on plastics and what to do about them. So first of all, let me just give you some background information. How big a problem is plastics? Well, it's big. It's really big. I mean, just the global volume of plastics produced in 1 year. You know, I can't even tell you what, this is almost 400 million metric tons of plastic produced globally just in the year 2020. That's an estimate. We have an actual number of, I think, 368 million metric tons in 2019. But it's hard to find anything to compare this to. And plastics, as we know, are mostly lightweight. So by weight, it's just unfathomable. But one thing we do know, we know there's a lot being produced, but we also know that it's growing fast. And the rate of growth has been increasing in recent years. The forecast that I have from Statista indicates a continued increase in plastics, but not an increase in growth rate necessarily. And I think what they've factored in is plastics abatement efforts that are happening all over the world, and particularly in the West here, in North America and Europe. 1/3 of plastics are used once and thrown away. And plastics basically never go away. They may break down into smaller particles, but they will last for thousands of years. Only 8.5% of plastics were recycled in the US in 2018. That's data from the EPA, the US EPA. 76% of plastics went into landfills. More than 3/4 went into landfills. And as you can see, the amount of plastics being recycled has grown in recent years, but not very much compared to the amount of plastics going into landfills. The remainder, about 16%, is burned. And of course, that comes with its own environmental issues. Plastics in landfills are a big problem because they leach chemicals into the groundwater. That gets into our lakes and streams and rivers, and even into drinking water. The chemicals from plastics are actually, they've run tests on people in various studies, and almost all of us have these chemicals in our bodies, and they are only from plastics. We know that. And the chemicals are harmful to our health. They've been associated with everything from endocrine system disruptions, hormonal problems, to cancer, and even dementia. Plastic waste is choking our oceans and lakes and rivers. I'm sure you've seen a lot about that in the news. And of course, they harm wildlife everywhere, but particularly in the oceans. This awful picture here is a picture from a beach in Indonesia where a dead whale washed up and had hundreds and hundreds of plastic items that it had ingested, and which obviously killed it. And that's what you see here. So wildlife are harmed not only by ingestion of plastics, but also entanglement in the plastics, particularly fishing lines and such. And plastics are poisoning our food chain. So what can we as individuals do about this? There are a lot of things we can do. Here's a short list. Bring reusable bags with you when you go shopping, canvas bags, cloth bags. Keep some in your trunk so you never have to worry about remembering to bring them. You can get mesh bags that are lightweight and see-through for produce. So when you go to the grocery store, you can use those instead of the plastic bags in the produce section. Bring a reusable water bottle or travel mug when you're out. And bring your own containers to restaurants or any events where you think you might want to take home some food. You can keep a few of those in your car too. Tell merchants that you patronize that you don't use single-use plastics, and tell them why. Ask them to consider switching to something biodegradable. When you're ordering takeout from restaurants, specify no plastic or styrofoam. Styrofoam is actually a form of plastic. and equally non-biodegradable. For food storage at home, reuse plastic containers and bags that you've already got, things that you bought other food in, wash them out, keep them, reuse them for food storage. And you can also get reusable wrappers for to cover and seal dishes of food that are made with cloth-based material or beeswax. Also at home, use real dishes and cutlery, of course. And when grocery shopping, buy bulk foods. And I don't mean a lot of food. The bulk does not mean a huge amount. In the produce section, for example, you can buy 2 carrots in bulk. But buy anything non-prepackaged that you possibly can. And if you're buying a box of something, try to avoid individually wrapped items that are inside. Personal consumer items like shampoo and conditioner now come in bars, which are packaged in paper and cardboard. Laundry detergent comes in a box. Milk and juice and such, you can get cartons. All of these things are alternatives to plastic, but you have to look for them. So do that and reduce the amount of plastic that you're buying at the store. And lastly, recycle. Of course, and here's Swalco's website address. I suggest you go there at swalco.org to find out what kind of plastics they recycle.
We probably should point out that Swalco is the solid waste. What does it stand for? Solid Waste Alliance, or?
I don't remember what it stands for, but it's the waste disposal company for our area.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. It's the organization that does, picks up our recycling and so on. So to the New Plastics Initiative, we're going to start with a very focused grassroots action, focusing on local restaurants, trying to work with them to help them use less single-use plastic. And this is just a starting point. There's plenty of room for expansion to other types of plastic and other types of organizations and companies that we can work with. So for right now, we're starting with this local restaurant initiative, and we're going to do some more research on the impact of plastics and develop a public education initiative to make people more aware of why plastics are such a big problem and what they can do about it. And we just had our first meeting last week of the new plastics team. So it's a great time to get involved with this initiative. We're on the ground floor. And our next meeting is Tuesday, January 26th at 7 p.m. on Zoom, of course. So please join us. If you'd like to attend the meeting, send me an email, or even if you just have questions, send me an email. I'm Sharon Starr. And the email should go to scwwprojects@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Very, very, very good. Thank you very much, Sharon. I sure do appreciate your expertise and your energy and your sense of initiative here. Rosemary Heileman has entered in the chat box that SWALCO stands for the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County. So thank you very much. Next up, our final speaker is Jay Futterman. Jay is just a walking encyclopedia on all things energy. This guy knows more about energy and solar power than any other 3 people that I know, and he's got a great opportunity for all of us who are interested in renewable energy. So Jay, take it away.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Okay, so as if 2020 wasn't bad enough, turns out 2020 is tied for the hottest year in recorded human history, and that's obviously because of greenhouse gases and that. And it turns out, thank you, Jeff, that poison ivy loves this. So more reasons to do something about the climate crisis. And one of the best ways we have to address that is by deciding where you get your energy from, your electricity. So Illinois has a program called Community Solar, which even if you don't have a roof that's suitable for solar energy, you could subscribe to solar projects that are being built all across Illinois and essentially purchase your electricity from these solar panels. Now, many of you have probably gotten some direct mailings about third-party energy suppliers or clean energy options out there, and it's a world of confusion. But Sierra Club is partnering with CUB, the Citizens Utility Board. And we're doing a couple of webinars coming up all about understanding community solar, what it is, how you know what a good deal is, all the nuts and bolts of it. We're having our first one Thursday, January 21st at 5:30. And then there'll be another one Friday, February 12th at noon. So I'd encourage y'all to check those out. I'll put links to that into the chat as well as my email in case anyone has any questions.
So it looks like it's
So
http://bit.ly/community solar Jan 21. Is that right?
Yeah, isn't that's a catchy one? Let me drop this all in the chat for you.
Okay.
My those are the dates. I got my email there if anyone has any specific question.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Anything else? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you all for participating in our webinar tonight. This is the largest audience we've had to date, and we're really excited about it. Mark your calendar for February 14th. That's Valentine's night, when Nan Buckhart of the Lake County Forest Preserve District will join us to talk about courtship and reproduction in the natural world. Be a great webinar, and I'm sure for the whole family. I'm sure it'll be G-rated. Don't worry about that. So we'll see you on Sunday night, February 14th at 7 p.m. Thank you all very, very much. Good night.